The organizers need to keep more in mind where the players are from and what the actual fan base is here.
What if I told you that a 20-year-old woman from the Philippines, ranked outside the top 40 in the world, drew 6 times more viewers online than the reigning Wimbledon champion? Not in a mash. Not in a highlight that went viral. In a press conference. A routine, sit-down, journalists asking questions press conference. And while that was happening, thousands of people were standing in a line that stretched hundreds of yards just to watch her play on a court that holds 1,500 people. Some of them never got in. Security had to turn them away while the match was already being played inside. So here is the real question. How does a player ranked 44th in the world create a moment so large that the sport itself is not ready for her? That is exactly what we are going to break down today. Because what is happening with Alex Eala right now is not just a sports story. It is something the tennis world has never seen before, and it is happening in real time. Let's start with the number that the entire tennis world is still trying to process. At the 2026 Australian Open, before a single ball was struck in Alex Eala's first-round match, her pre-tournament press conference polled 171,000 viewers online. 171,000 people watching a player answer questions from journalists. Carlos Alcaraz, the reigning French Open champion and 2-time Wimbledon winner, drew 29,000. Coco Gauff drew 29,000. Aryna Sabalenka, the defending Australian Open champion, drew 9,000. And Eala, ranked outside the top 40, drew nearly 6 times the audience of the world's best male tennis player. Now stop and think about what that actually means. The ranking system in tennis is supposed to tell you who matters. It is built on results, on titles, on points collected across months and years of competition. And yet every single metric of human attention was pointing somewhere the rankings were not. That gap, between what the numbers say and what the people already knew, is the most important story in women's tennis right now. Then came January 16, 2026. Eala's first-round singles match at Melbourne Park, and the Australian Open made a decision that is going to follow that institution for years. They put her on court 6, a court that holds approximately 1,500 people. Outside that court, the queue stretched hundreds of yards through the grounds. Families who had driven across the city were in that line. Couples who had taken the day off work were in that line. Fans who had traveled from other states, some from other countries entirely, were in that line. They stood there for hours. Many of them never got through the gate. Security cleared the overflow after the match had already started. Hundreds of fans turned away at one of the 4 biggest tennis events on the planet, while inside, 1,500 people watched a player who had just drawn 171,000 viewers to a press conference compete in a first-round match. That is not a scheduling mistake. That is a failure of imagination. And the sport's own credibility demanded a response. It came from 3 directions at once, and none of them were small voices. On Tennis Channel, during a live Australian Open broadcast, Martina Navratilova, 18 Grand Slam singles titles, 9 Wimbledon championships, the most decorated women's tennis player in the history of the sport, said directly on air that organizers need to keep more in mind where the players are from and what the actual fan base is. She was not speaking generally. She was naming a specific tournament, a specific decision, and a specific player. Standing beside her, 1999 Wimbledon champion and former world number 1 Lindsay Davenport called Eala probably the most famous female from the Philippines and almost certainly one of the most famous people ever to come through there in the sporting world, and said directly she probably needed to be on a bigger show court. On BBC Radio 5 Live, Great Britain's Billie Jean King Cup captain and Keithaving said she could not believe the cues and asked a simple question on record. Who is on the scheduling team? 3 voices, 3 separate platforms, 1 unmistakable verdict. The scheduling was wrong, the decision was wrong, and 3 of the most credible voices the sport has produced said so publicly on the record, while the tournament was still happening. Here is what makes this story even more extraordinary. The Australian Open had every piece of information it needed before it made that scheduling call. It knew Eala was the most watched player at its own tournament before the first ball was struck. It knew Melbourne's 60,000-strong Filipino community was mobilizing around her match. It knew the social media numbers were unlike anything a player ranked outside the top 30 had ever generated in the tournament's history. And with all of that information on the table, they put her on court 6. The official response from the tournament was that it would take this as a learning for next year. Read that again. Take it as a learning. That sentence tells you everything. It confirms they were caught off guard. It confirms they underestimated what was in front of them. And it confirms that every other major tennis institution in the world was now watching very carefully to see whether they would repeat the same mistake or write a completely different story. Now move forward 8 days. April 24, 2026. Ela walks off the clay at the Mutua Madrid Open after losing 2-6, 1-6 to Elise Mertens in under an hour. Third consecutive loss on clay this season. No contested third set, no dramatic comeback, no hidden moral victory in the scoreline. The numbers were brutal. Her ranking slipped from a career high of approximately 29 in March down to approximately 44 in the world. The clay had not been kind. She could have gone to the WTA 125 Catalonia Open. The draw was smaller, the competition was lighter, the ranking points were available and she needed them. She did not go. Instead, she pointed herself directly at the Italian Open in Rome. The biggest clay event outside of Roland Garros. The deepest possible field. And only 20 ranking points to defend, having lost in the first round in Rome in 2025. That means every win at the Foro Italico is pure gain, no pressure on the scoreboard, no points to protect. What she chose to do after the worst loss of her clay season tells you more about who she is than any ranking number ever could. She did not go where it was easier. She went where it mattered. Greg Rusedski, the 1997 US Open finalist, addressed her clay losses directly on his podcast and said what a lot of people who have watched this sport long enough already believe. He said the losses she is taking are part of the learning experience, that she is too good a player and she will figure it out, and that what he admires is her resilience. Those words carry weight coming from someone who knows what a bruising loss on tour feels like. Because the reality of women's professional tennis at the highest level is that the margins are impossibly thin, the competition is brutal week after week, and the players who survive it and grow through it are the ones who choose the harder path when the easier one is sitting right there in front of them. Now ask yourself this. If Ela reaches the quarterfinal in Rome, does the Foro Italico give her the showcase court she has already earned, or does Italian tennis make the same decision Melbourne made in January? Because right now, before a single point of her Italian Open campaign has been played, the patterns forming outside the Foro Italico's marble gates look very familiar. Multiple confirmed reports document thousands of Filipino fans already gathered in Rome outside the venue waiting for her matches to begin. Ela was filmed thanking fans who had traveled to Italy before the main draw even started. Ticket demand has reportedly surged around her matches. These people did not wait for a result to book their flights. They did not wait for a ranking milestone to justify the journey. They arrived in Rome, in one of the most historically loaded cities in the world, on faith alone. And here is what the tennis world is still learning about that faith. It has a way of being repaid. Consider what has already been built here without a single Grand Slam title to anchor it. A woman named V, a Filipino who lives in Sydney, Australia, traveled to Melbourne specifically for Ela's first-round match. Not for a holiday. Not for the Australian Open generally. Specifically for Ela. When asked why she made that journey, she said Ela carries the flag and the country proudly, that she is becoming a national hero, and that everyone is stopping what they are doing to tune in when she plays. That is one person, one face, one trip. Multiply that by the thousands who showed up in Melbourne. Now multiply that by the thousands who are in Rome right now. And then ask yourself what happens when this player wins a major title, because tournament directors are already having that conversation. They are already invoking the Li Na moment. Li Na won the 2011 French Open and detonated a Chinese tennis market the sport had spent years trying to crack through conventional means. One player, one title, one cultural ignition point, and the WTA's revenue relationship with China transformed entirely. The Southeast Asian diaspora spread across Melbourne, Dubai, Riyadh, Rome, Los Angeles, and every major WTA city on the calendar does not just represent passionate fans. It represents commercial infrastructure that the sport has never fully mobilized. And it is standing outside the Foro Italico right now waiting for the gates to open. The Italian Open itself is in the middle of a historically significant campaign. ATP President Angelo Binaghi has publicly and persistently argued for Rome to be recognized as a fifth Grand Slam. What that bid requires beyond courts and prize money is global visibility. The kind of visibility that happens when the entire Philippines goes online to watch what is unfolding at the Foro Italico on a Tuesday afternoon. Rome is watching what Melbourne allowed to happen, and it has a choice to make in real time. The most commercially significant question in women's tennis is no longer about who is ranked first in the world. It is about whether the institutions that run this sport are capable of recognizing a once-in-a-generation phenomenon before the moment passes them. The fans who have followed Alex Ela from the very beginning, who tracked her matches when the broadcasts were unreliable and the courts were small, they were not chasing a dream. They were tracking a certainty that the rest of the sport was simply too slow to see. Every venue she walks into now is just catching up to what that community already understood. So here's the question worth leaving in the comments right now. If Ela reaches the quarterfinal in Rome, do you think the Foro Italico puts her on the show court she has already earned, or do we watch the same story repeat itself? Because the next several days are going to answer that. Every match, every crowd scene, every scheduling decision coming out of Rome will tell us whether this sport has finally learned. And if you are not subscribed yet, you are about to miss the most closely watched clay court run of 2026 unfold in real time. The moment is already here. The only question is whether you are watching before it happens or after.